Sunday, April 23 was the day when DA 1431 ran her sold-out Alpine Ranger excursion to Arthur's Pass. Besides the excursion, I filmed a sizable number of the regular KiwiRail services, starting at Rolleston Station with DXC's 5517 and 5293 hauling train 803 to Greymouth. 5293 was recently overhauled at Hutt Workshops, losing her distinctive early KiwiRail livery in the process. I don't know about you, but I think she looked much better in Phase 1 colours, and her appearance was spoiled by the overhaul. When I arrived at Rolleston Station, I was eventually met by a couple of fellow rail fans, and it took me a while to realise that this is a former island platform, with the space once occupied by a second track now being partially occupied by a car park. Seeing this vintage fire engine on the back of a truck reminded me of the old fire engine owned by Laurie as one of his mechanical marvels. His aptly named Jupiter, to be exact. I think this one was heading to the Plains Railway for a vintage vehicle display. By the time the TranzAlpine finally showed up, the weather had turned very misty with limited visibility. Incidentally, this was the first time I had ever seen DXC 5517, whereas I had previously seen 5293 passing through Huntly in November 2020. AKF 6112 is quite a bizarre vehicle. She is the new kitchen coach that entered service on April 14, and passengers can get fancier food on board this thing for the low price of Christ, how much?! I'm not saying that people aren't allowed to get the Scenic Plus option if they want to, I'm just saying that I think it's way too expensive. Just like those new add-ons in Train Sim World 3. AKF 6112 is a former British Rail Mark II F coach that was initially modified to become an SA coach for Auckland commuter service. The SAs were used alongside DC or DFB locomotives and SD cab cars between 2004 and 2015. More recently, the coach has been refurbished again, and now looks really weird with all window spaces blanked out and only one set of doors left on each side. DA 1431 showed up 54 minutes after DXC's 5517 and 5293, hauling a rake of 7 vintage coaches over to Arthur's Pass. Incidentally, the DAs historically never ran in the South Island, aside from one occasion with 1471, but this still looks like a proper vintage train as far as I'm concerned. Although I would have preferred to see a steam locomotive, and I've already seen DA 1431 in action this year, it's still nice to see vintage locomotives on the main line. For reference, the DA is a New Zealand variant of the EMD G12 model, and 146 of them were built between 1955 and 1967. 85 DAs were rebuilt as the DC class, and 6 unrebuilt DAs are preserved, with 1431 being the only surviving Australian-built DA. After seeing DA 1431 shove off, I had to wait the better part of an hour for the number 5 bus back to Christchurch. The specific bus I was on was GB 8948, a Geely C12 ENZ, and throughout the journey it was pretty full. But it was good to see plenty of people using the bus instead of a car, especially on a Sunday. And quite bizarrely, the interior smelled like a dentist's office. When I arrived back in the city, I felt like walking over to the tram line and seeing what was running. The line is actually a very short walk from the bus interchange, just going up Colombo Street. The Christchurch Tramway opened in 1995, and it's a tourist operation through the city centre. This city actually has 2 tram lines, with the second one being located over at Ferrymead Heritage Park, but I didn't go there on this trip. Oddly enough, most of the trams that run on this line aren't even from Christchurch. This one, for instance, is W2 class number 244 from Melbourne, Australia. Over at Cathedral Junction, I found the dinky little ex-Dunedin tram number 11 sitting on the short spur that runs to the depot. She is 120 years old, having been built in 1903. What was formerly number 1808 is an R-class tram from Sydney. This one was built in 1934, and I remember seeing her at Motat back in 2011. Invercargill number 15 was an especially bizarre catch, as I had no idea Invercargill ever had a tram system. She was built in 1921, and bears a strong resemblance to the Melbourne X1 that runs in Auckland's Wynyard Quarter. Apparently the Invercargill system was in operation from 1912 to 1952.
This is the closest we come to the transitional convoy.
Later in the afternoon, I was out at Annex Road in Middleton, with the first catch being DXB's 5068 and 5120 returning light engine from Rolleston. DXC 5379 led a convoy of 6 locomotives out of the yard as train 827W, with the first 4 being a banker exchange for Aotearoa. DXC 5264 and DC 4761 were headed for the Hokitika branch, which is served by the once daily X6 shunt from Greymouth. Lastly, I caught DFB 7239 and DXB 5068 leaving with train 939 to Invercargill. Quite bizarrely, this was the only DFB I saw throughout the entire trip. After finishing up at Annex Road, I went back to central Christchurch to film ex-Melbourne W2 tram number 411, which is now a mobile restaurant. This thing is 96 years old, having been built in 1927, and has been running as a restaurant tram in Christchurch for the last 23 years. While doing some research on 411, I found a document discussing her history before she came to New Zealand. I was very confused to find out that, at one point, she was placed inside a hotel in New South Wales.